The Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Navies from the United States conducted the 2 days first bilateral maritime cooperative activity this year in the West Philippine Sea. Amidst continues illegal intrusion of Chinese Coast Guard vessel, 60 to 70 miles from the baseline of Zambales, well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Participating units include the U.S. Navy Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group and a U.S. Navy P-8A assigned to Commander, Task Force 72, alongside Gregorio del Pilar class offshore patrol vessel BRP Andres Bonifacio, PS-17, and Jose Rizal class guided missile frigate BRP Antonio Luna, FF-151, from the Philippine Navy. CSG-1 consists of Carl Vinson, embarked staffs of CSG-1 and Destroyer Squadron 1, Carrier Air Wing 2, CVW-2, Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser USS Princeton, CG-59, and Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers USS Sterett, DDG-104, and USS William P. Lawrence, DDG-110. CVW-2 is composed of 9 squadrons flying the F-35C Lightning II, F-A-18E, F Super Hornets, EA-18G Growler, E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, CMV-22 Osprey and MH-60RS Seahawks. Maritime Cooperative Activity or Joint Maritime Patrol demonstrate a collective commitment to strengthen regional and international cooperation in support of a free and open Indo-Pacific. This joint maritime patrol is designed to emphasize the U.S. Philippines' long-standing partnership between the two militaries in the maritime domain. This maritime cooperative activity between the Philippine and U.S. navies marks the first activity between the two nations in the South China Sea in 2025. It also is the first time to fully include a carrier strike group as a joint patrol planned around this time. Last year was cancelled due to an operational necessity on the American side. Coincidentally, these drills are taking place amid an almost 2-week-long showdown between Philippine and China Coast Guard ships off Luzon within Manila's exclusive economic zone in the South China Sea. According to Captain Matthew Thomas, commanding officer of the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson, CVN-70, bilateral exercises in the region have grown in scale, scope and complexity, and we are proud to participate in combined operations that maintain stability in the region and reinforce deterrence. As the flagship of Carrier Strike Group 1, Carl Vinson is both excited and honored to conduct maritime exercises with the Armed Forces of the Philippines. MCAs are conducted in a manner that is consistent with international law and with due regard to the safety of navigation and the rights and interests of other states. The Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group is operating in the U.S. 7th Fleet area of operations. U.S. 7th Fleet is the U.S. Navy's largest forward-deployed numbered fleet, and routinely interacts and operates with allies and partners in preserving a free and open Indo-Pacific region. According to Rear Admiral Michael Washa, Commander, Carrier Strike Group 1, the U.S. and the Philippines are ironclad allies. As fellow maritime nations, we share the common goal of a free and open Indo-Pacific, assuring access to the seas. Professional engagement with allies, partners, and friends in the region allows us to build upon our existing, strong relationships and continue to learn from each other. Each subsequent MCA builds upon the last, enabling added levels of complexity and interoperability which advance and strengthen combined capabilities, tactics, techniques, and procedures. The Philippine Coast Guard, PCG, continues to monitor the presence of a China Coast Guard vessel within Philippine waters as it enters the second week of its presence. According to PCG spokesman to the West Philippine Sea, Commodore J. Terriella, the BRP Gabriela Salang, OPV 8301, has been monitoring CCG vessel 5901, which has been detected 60 to 70 nautical miles off the coast of Zambales. During the patrol, PCG personnel issued repeated radio challenges to the Chinese vessel, emphasizing that its presence and activities in the area are unauthorized.
Vessel 5901. This is Philippine Coast Guard Vessel BRP Gabriela Silang, OPV 8301. You are advised that you are currently sailing inside the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone, approximately 73.8 nautical miles from the coastline southwest of Capones Point, Zambales, Philippines. In accordance with Republic Act 12064, the Philippine Maritime Zones Act, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, of which you are a party, and the 2016 Arbitral Award, you do not possess any legal authority to patrol inside the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone. You are directed to depart immediately and notify us with your intentions. Your illegal activity will be reported to higher authorities. Over.
Terriella stressed that while foreign-flagged vessels enjoy freedom of navigation under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, this does not include conducting patrols within the exclusive economic zone of another state. The PCG has been monitoring the movements of CCG Vessel 5901 for the past 2 weeks and remains resolute in its efforts to counter what it describes as illegal operations in Philippine waters. PCG Commandant Admiral Ronnie Gil Gavin reaffirmed the agency's commitment to protecting the country's maritime rights, citing the Philippine Maritime Zones Act, UNCLOS, and the 2016 Arbitral Award as the legal basis for asserting the country's jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. The latest incident comes amid continued tensions in the disputed waters, where Chinese vessels have frequently been reported conducting unauthorized patrols and maritime operations. The PCG vowed to continue its monitoring efforts and ensure that unlawful actions by foreign vessels in Philippine waters do not go unchallenged. Newly appointed U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the United States under President Donald Trump remain committed to the Philippines' defense, as tensions simmer with Beijing in the South China Sea. In a call with his Philippine counterpart Enrique Manalo, Rubio underscored the United States' ironclad commitments to the Philippines under the two nations' mutual defense treaty, State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce said. Rubio, a longtime hawk on China, discussed the dangerous and destabilizing actions in the South China Sea by Beijing, formerly known as the People's Republic of China, PRC.
But the bulk of that book about the 21st century will be not just about China, but about the relationship between China and the United States and what direction it went. And I think you're alluding to it in your statement. I know you may have another question. I don't want to eat up all your time, but I do want to say this. The Chinese believe that the United States are a great power in inevitable decline and that they are an inevitable rise. Now they already are. They're going to be a rich and powerful country and we're going to have to deal with them. The danger is that because of our own actions, in many cases, a dangerous imbalance is built up in that relationship. We allowed them for years to pretend that they were some developing countries, so we should allow them to continue to cheat on trade and commerce. We should allow them to continue to expand. They lied about not militarizing and populating island chains in the South China Sea and the like. We allowed them for years before we got serious about it to conduct grotesque human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims, as an example. One of the most horrifying things happening on the planet. And for years no one talked about it, which by the way not just has a human rights component to it, it allows them to use slave labor to produce goods that, at the expense of the rest of the world. Talk about it, not just a horrific humanitarian crisis, but an unfair trade practice as well. We've allowed them to get away with things, and frankly the Chinese did what any country in the world would do given these opportunities. They took advantage of it. And so I think now we're dealing with the ramifications of it. I agree 100% what you said, but I remind you, and I remind everyone, I guess I want to make this point, that much of what we need to do to confront China is here at home. It's not just abroad, it's also here at home. We have to rebuild our domestic industrial capacity, and we have to make sure that the United States is not reliant on any single other nation for any of our critical supply chains.
Secretary Rubio conveyed that the PRC's behavior undermines regional peace and stability and is inconsistent with international law. Rubio made the call with his Philippine counterpart a day after a veiled warning to Beijing on the South China Sea during a four-way meeting with his counterparts from India, Japan, and Australia. The Philippines have engaged in increasingly tense confrontations with China over disputed South China Sea waters and reefs over the past year. China claims most of the strategic waterway despite an international tribunal ruling that its claim lacked any legal basis. The Philippine government is hopeful that Manila and Washington will maintain their strong and dynamic relationship under the incoming U.S. administration as President-elect Donald Trump assumes office. The United States has a decades-old security alliance with the Philippines that includes a mutual defense treaty and a 2014 pact which allows the U.S. military to store equipment on 9 Philippine bases. With President-elect Trump assuming office on January 20th, many in the Philippines are wary about the future of Manila and Washington's relationship. But the Philippine government expressed optimism in maintaining the strong and dynamic relationship between the two countries, particularly on economics, defense, and security. Manila emphasized that Washington will continue to stand for their shared values and the rule of international law, particularly in South China Sea disputes with China. Manila and Washington will remain steadfast friends and ironclad allies regardless of who wins the White House race. The relationship between Philippines and the U.S. has stood the test of time for decades. When looking at the foreign military financing and the support for the U.S.-Philippine military relationship, it is as many Republicans as Democrats who are enthusiastically supporting the U.S.-Philippine alliance. The Philippines and U.S. leaders emphasized their shared intent to grow and modernize their military alliance and cooperation in other sectors, with Philippine government underscoring that the presence of the United States was crucial to regional peace. Mary Kay Carlson, United States Ambassador to the Philippines, who has witnessed transition from Republican to Democrat to Republican and back and forth in her 39 years of working in the U.S. State Department, underscored that the U.S. would remain a steadfast ally not just of the Philippines, but also of other Indo-Pacific states. Remember, when you think about the security situation here in the Indo-Pacific, it was under the Trump administration that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo came out and lent credence and the United States voices its support to the arbitral ruling that favored the Philippines. During a phone call with outgoing U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, both parties, the United States and the Philippines, affirmed deepened ties together with Japanese government. The Vice President affirmed the importance of continued defense of international rules and norms in the South China Sea in the face of provocations from the People's Republic of China and noted the United States must stand with the Philippines in the face of such provocations and the enduring nature of the U.S. defense commitments to the Philippines. The call with Harris came the same week Marcos held a call with outgoing President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, where they reaffirmed their commitment to advance a free and open Indo-Pacific. The Philippines and Japan, both longtime U.S. allies, have stepped up security cooperation with Washington to blunt China's efforts to control most of the disputed South China Sea. For the past 8 decades, the Philippines has anchored its foreign policy in a steadfast alliance with the United States, based on mutual security interests and deep historical ties. But as Donald Trump prepares to reclaim the White House, this partnership now faces a formidable test. Observers warn that Trump's transactional approach to diplomacy and unpredictable leadership style could strain cooperation between the two treaty allies, at a time when unified action looks ever more essential amid rising tensions with Beijing in the South China Sea. Given Trump's reputation for squeezing allies or resources in order to offer some sort of promise for their defense, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos' administration is likely concerned about the future. Beyond their mutual defense obligations, the Philippines relies heavily on the U.S. for aid packages, military modernization support, intelligence sharing, and joint training exercises. For Washington, this long-standing alliance, nurtured under outgoing President Joe Biden, provides strategic access to Philippine military bases and a key partner in countering Beijing's expansionism, particularly regarding Taiwan. Donald Trump's inauguration as president signals the start of a new chapter in U.S. policy toward Asia, particularly in its approach to China and regional allies. With a focus on reasserting American strength, his administration is likely to emphasize economic decoupling, military modernization, and alliance burden sharing in the Indo-Pacific. This shift could redefine the strategic balance in the region and intensify competition with Beijing. Donald Trump's return to the presidency ushers in a new era for U.S. engagement in the Indo-Pacific, with policies likely to reshape regional dynamics and redefine America's strategic priorities. His administration's approach will center on countering China's growing influence, strengthening military capabilities, and pushing allies to take on greater responsibility. These changes will have far-reaching implications, not only for the balance of power in Asia but also for the future of U.S. alliances and partnerships. The shifting dynamics of the Indo-Pacific under Trump's presidency require a nuanced understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead. Political experts offer critical perspectives on how these challenges can be addressed. Key issues such as reforming the defense acquisition process to address inefficiencies and ensure military readiness, recalibrating alliances to strengthen cooperation with partners like Philippines, South Korea and Japan, and managing the balance of power with China through strategic innovation and engagement. The United States faces a formidable challenge from China, a powerful adversary attempting to reshape Asia's geopolitical landscape. To respond effectively, the United States needs strong and reliable regional allies.